Your coffee, sir.
Thanks. You look like you have something to say.
Just be careful. They're watching.
The rain fell hard over Chicago, turning the streets into dark mirrors that reflected broken neon lights and tired faces. It was late, past 11, and the city had begun to slow into its rough, uneasy sleep. Wind rattled old signs, water pooled along cracked sidewalks, and every passing car hissed as its tires cut through the wet road. Inside the Silver Fork, the night dragged on. Lena Caldwell wiped the counter with a damp cloth, her shoulders aching from a double shift that refused to end. She was 21, thin from stress and skipped meals, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun that refused to stay neat no matter how many pins she used. Her uniform apron was stained with coffee and syrup, and her feet burned inside cheap sneakers that had long lost their cushion. The diner smelled like grease, old wood, and burnt coffee. The kind of place that stayed open because someone always needed somewhere to be at night. Only a few customers remained. A trucker slumped over pancakes in the corner. A college kid stared at his phone near the window. Pop, the cook, stood behind the grill, flipping bacon with slow, tired movements. Lena poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. 10 more minutes, she told herself. Then I can go home. The bell above the door rang. The sound cut through the diner like a blade. Lena straightened without thinking. 3 men stepped inside. The first was tall and broad, wearing a dark charcoal coat that looked too expensive for the rain-soaked street outside. His presence filled the room instantly. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He moved like the space belonged to him. This was Marco DeLuca. Behind him came 2 armed men. One was thick-necked with a broken nose and hard eyes. The other was slimmer, wearing glasses that reflected the diner lights in sharp flashes. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The air in the Silver Fork changed. The trucker froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. The college kid lowered his phone. Pop stopped moving entirely, spatula hanging in the air. Marco DeLuca scanned the diner once, his pale blue eyes calm and cold. Then he slid into booth 4, the corner booth, with his back to the wall and a clear view of the door and kitchen. Lena's heart began to pound. Don't stare. Don't panic. Just do your job. She picked up the coffee pot, though her hand shook slightly, and walked toward the booth. Black, Marco said without looking up from his phone. Yes, sir, Lena replied softly. She tipped the pot and watched the dark liquid fill the mug. Steam curled upward, warm against her face. As she poured, her eyes lifted, not to him but to the mirrored wall along the diner's side. The mirror was old and scratched, meant to make the narrow space look wider. In the reflection, Lena saw the street outside. A black sedan rolled silently to a stop across the road. Its headlights were off. Her breath caught. The back window slid down. Slowly. Too slowly. A long, matte black rifle barrel emerged from the darkness, pointing straight through the diner window, aimed at the back of Marco DeLuca's head. Time stretched. If she screamed, the gun would fire. If she dropped the pot, the noise might trigger the shot. If she did nothing, he would die right in front of her. Lena's thoughts vanished. There was no fear, no plan, only instinct. She finished pouring. She set the pot down gently. Then she placed her left hand on the table where Marco could see it without turning his head. She tucked her thumb into her palm, folded her fingers over it, and tapped the table twice with her index finger. Tap, tap. The movement was tiny, almost invisible, but Marco DeLuca saw it. His eyes flicked to her hand, then to her face. For a single second their eyes met. Understanding flashed in his gaze. Marco moved. He kicked the table up with explosive force. The rifle fired. Glass shattered. The bullet tore through the booth where Marco's head had been a moment before, ripping vinyl and burying itself in the wall. Chaos erupted. People screamed. The trucker hit the floor. The college kid dove under the counter. Pop shouted something Lena couldn't hear. Marco grabbed Lena by the wrist and yanked her down behind the overturned table as more shots rang out. His men were already firing back, their guns deafening in the tight space. The black sedan peeled away outside, tires screeching on wet pavement. Silence slammed down hard and sudden. Lena lay on the dirty floor, shaking, the smell of dust and old grease filling her nose. Marco was above her, shielding her body with his own. Stay down, he hissed. After a moment he stood. Glass crunched under his shoes as he straightened his coat and scanned the ruined booth. Then he looked down at Lena. Get up, he said. She took his hand. His grip was strong, steady. He pulled her to her feet. Who are you? Marco asked. It wasn't curiosity. It was command. Alina, she stammered. Lena Caldwell. He stepped closer, tilting her chin up with a gloved finger. Where did you learn that signal? Her mouth went dry. I saw it in a movie. Marco's eyes hardened. Liar. He turned to the man with glasses. Get the car. Lena's panic spiked. Wait, I need to finish my shift. Pop needs. You just saved my life, Marco said flatly. The shooter saw you. If I leave you here, you'll be dead before sunrise. He buttoned his coat and nodded toward the door. Come. She didn't have time to argue. They moved fast, past shattered glass and stunned customers. Rain slammed into Lena as they stepped outside. An armored black SUV waited at the curb. The door opened. Marco guided her inside. The engine roared to life. As the vehicle pulled away, Lena looked back at the silver fork, at the glowing sign, the broken window, the place her life had just ended. The city blurred past as the SUV disappeared into the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. The drive out of the city felt unreal. Lena sat stiffly in the back of the armored SUV, rain streaking across the tinted windows as Chicago slowly fell behind them. Streetlights thinned. Buildings gave way to long dark roads lined with trees and iron fences. The city noise faded, replaced by the low hum of the engine and the steady sound of her own breathing. Marco DeLuca sat across from her, silent. He hadn't looked at her since they left the diner. One of his men sat in the front passenger seat. The other drove. Lena folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. After nearly 40 minutes, the SUV slowed. Massive iron gates rose out of the darkness, flanked by stone pillars and cameras that tracked the car as it approached. The gates opened without a sound. Beyond them stood the DeLuca estate. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Tall stone walls surrounded manicured grounds. Guards moved along the perimeter, their shapes sharp under floodlights. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. The SUV rolled up a curved driveway and stopped beneath a wide overhang. The door opened. Out, Marco said. Lena stepped onto smooth stone, her sneakers soaked from the rain. The air here felt colder, cleaner, less forgiving. Inside, the estate was vast and quiet. Marble floors reflected soft lighting. The walls were decorated with black and white artwork that felt more intimidating than beautiful. Everything was expensive. Everything was controlled. Marco walked ahead. Lena followed, feeling small with every step. You are not a guest, Marco said without turning. You are a protected liability. The words landed hard. Hey, what? Lena asked. You saved my life, he said calmly. That gives you value. It also makes you a problem. She swallowed. I didn't ask for this. Doesn't matter. They stopped in the middle of the foyer. Marco turned to face her fully. These are the rules, he said. You don't leave the grounds. You don't contact anyone. No phone calls. No messages. No social media. You exist here and only here until I say otherwise. Lena stopped herself. That's prison. Marco's eyes flickered. Prison keeps people alive. A thick-necked guard appeared at his side. Take her to the east wing, Marco ordered. Blue room. Lock the door. Lena's chest tightened. Lock. For your safety, Marco said flatly. She wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. Instead, she followed. The room was nothing like she expected. The blue room was large, with tall windows draped in heavy curtains. A king-sized bed sat in the center, covered in crisp white sheets. A couch rested near a small fireplace. A chandelier glowed softly overhead. There was a walk-in closet filled with clothes, new clothes, in her size. Luxury wrapped around her like silk. The door closed behind her. Click. Lena rushed to it and tried the handle. Lock. She backed away slowly, her breath coming fast. The room was beautiful, but it felt wrong. Too perfect. Too quiet. She paced. After some time, she wasn't sure how long, the lock clicked again. The door opened. A slender man stepped inside, carrying a tray and a stack of books. He wore glasses and a calm expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Elliot Graves, he said. I handle logistics. He placed the tray on the table, eggs, toast, juice. Then he set the books and a laptop beside it. Graphic design, he continued. Your current classes. I also brought your notes. Lena stared. How did you? Mr. DeLuca likes to know things, Elliot said. The laptop is monitored. If you try to contact the police, the device will shut down. If you try again, Mr. DeLuca will break it. She frowned. I thought I wasn't a prisoner. You're not, Elliot said mildly. You're an investment. He turned toward the door. You'll be called for dinner, The door locked again. Lena sat heavily on the bed. Dinner came sooner than she expected. A maid returned to escort her downstairs. She handed Lena a simple black dress from the closet. "Mr. DeLuca requests this," the maid said. Lena changed, smoothing the fabric over her body. The dress fit too well. Like someone had planned for this. The dining room was enormous. A long table stretched beneath a chandelier, but only 2 places were set at one end. Marco stood near the head of the table, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up slightly. He looked tired. Dangerous. "Sit," he said. Lena did. Food was served silently. The staff vanished. Marco watched her closely as she picked at her plate. "Why are you here, Lena?" he asked. She hesitated. "You said why." "That's not what I meant." She met his gaze. "I didn't plan that night. I didn't even know who you were." "Yet you knew the signal," Marco said. Her fingers curled around her fork. "I told you. I saw it in a movie." Marco leaned back slightly. "Say it again." She did. He didn't react, but something in his eyes darkened. "Who taught you to watch hands?" he asked quietly. Lena's throat tightened. "My father." Marco waited. "He taught me when I was little," she continued. "Said hands tell the truth before mouths do." "What else did he teach you?" She hesitated, then spoke. "Signals. Warnings. When to stay quiet. When to move." Marco's gaze sharpened. "Describe him." Lena swallowed. "He had a scar. From his left ear down to his jaw. Said it was from an animal." Marco's hand stilled on his glass. "And a tattoo," Lena added. "On his forearm. A bird. A hawk holding a dagger. It looked faded, like he tried to burn it off." Silence filled the room. Marco looked at her, really looked at her, but his face gave nothing away. "You're finished?" he said finally. She blinked. "What?" "Dinner," he clarified. "You may go." Lena stood, confused and uneasy. As she left, she glanced back. Marco remained seated, staring at nothing. When the door closed behind her, Marco picked up his phone. "Elliot," he said quietly. "Pull every cold case from 2005. Start with disappearances. Focus on scars and burn tattoos." He ended the call, his expression unreadable. The past had just knocked on his door. Lena did not sleep. The blue room stayed quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against her ears and made her thoughts louder. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over, the way Marco's hand had gone still, the way his eyes had changed when she mentioned the scar and the tattoo. Something had shifted. By morning she knew it. The lock clicked just after 10. This time it wasn't a maid. It was Marco DeLuca. He stood in the doorway, jacket on, expression controlled, eyes sharp. Behind him, Elliot Graves waited in the hall, holding a thick manila folder. "Get dressed," Marco said. "You're coming with me." Lena's heart skipped. "Where?" "Somewhere private." They walked through parts of the estate she hadn't seen yet, quiet corridors, thick doors, guarded staircases, until they reached a study tucked deep within the house. It smelled like leather, old paper, and polished wood. Heavy shelves lined the walls. A large desk sat near the window. Marco closed the door himself. Elliot placed the folder on the desk and stepped back. "Leave us," Marco said. Elliot hesitated briefly, then nodded and exited. Marco did not sit. Neither did Lena. He picked up the folder and opened it slowly as if weighing something heavy. Inside were documents, reports, and photographs, yellowed at the edges, marked with time. He removed one photograph and slid it across the desk toward her. "Look," he said. Lena stepped forward. The photo was old. Black and white. A man stood outside a building, dressed sharply in a suit she had never seen her father wear. He looked younger. Harder. His posture was confident, his gaze steady. But she knew him instantly. Her breath left her in a rush. "That's my father," she whispered. "That's John." Marco watched her closely. "You're sure?" "Yes," Lena said firmly. "That's him." "The scar?" She pointed to the left side of the man's face. "Right there. Same eyes. Same mouth. That's him." Marco exhaled slowly, like someone bracing for impact. "His name wasn't John," Marco said. "Not in this file." Lena's chest tightened. "Then who was he?" "Giovanni Falcon," Marco replied. "And he wasn't just anyone." He leaned against the desk, folding his arms. 20 years ago, Giovanni Falcon was the underboss of this city. My father's right hand. The man who enforced order when words failed. Lena stared at him, the room spinning. "That's not possible. He taught me how to fix a bike." He burned pancakes. He told stupid jokes. Men like Giovanni had two lives, Marco said evenly. One for the world. One for blood. He flipped through the folder, revealing reports stamped with dates and names. He was brilliant, Marco continued. Quiet. Strategic. Fear. When he spoke, the entire organization listened. Lena shook her head. Then why did he run? Why did he leave me? Marco's eyes softened just slightly. He didn't leave you, he said. He vanished to protect you. He pulled out another document. There was a contract placed on the Falcon bloodline. Not on Giovanni alone. On his children. On his future. Lena's stomach dropped. Why? Because Giovanni discovered something, Marco said. Something powerful. Something dangerous. And instead of using it, he disappeared. He was supposed to be executed, Marco continued. But no body was ever found. Just a wrecked car and silence. That's what the police told me, Lena whispered. They said he died in an accident. Marco nodded. That was the story. Lena pressed her hands against the desk to steady herself. So everything, my childhood, foster homes, all of it, was the price of survival, Marco said. Giovanni erased himself so you could live. Silence filled the room again. Lena closed her eyes, memories crashing together. Her father's warnings. His constant movement. His fear when strangers looked too long. My name, she said quietly. You said Falcon. Marco straightened. You are Lena Falcon. Whether you want it or not. The words felt heavy. Final. I didn't ask for this, Lena said, her voice shaking. I don't want power. I don't want war. Marco met her gaze. Neither did he. He paused, then added, but blood doesn't ask permission. Lena laughed weakly. So what now? Am I, what? A threat. Marco studied her carefully. No, he said at last. You're a responsibility. She stiffened. That doesn't sound better. It is, Marco replied. Because responsibilities are protected. She searched his face. You thought I was a spy. I did, he admitted. I don't anymore. And now? Now, Marco said, I know why you knew the signal. Lena swallowed. Does your organization know? Not yet, Marco said. And they won't, until I decide. A knock came at the door. Marco opened it slightly. Rocco Bellini stood outside, jaw tight. The council is asking questions, Rocco said. They heard you pulled an old file. Marco's expression hardened. Tell them nothing, he said. Yet. Rocco nodded and left. Lena watched Marco carefully. They won't like this. No, Marco agreed. They won't. He turned back to her. From this moment forward, your safety is not optional. You don't move without protection. You don't speak freely. You don't trust easily. That sounds like fear, Lena said. That sounds like survival, Marco corrected. She took a deep breath. You're not handing me over. No, Marco said firmly. Why? Because, he said, choosing his words carefully, if they learn the Falcon bloodline still exists, they will not stop. Lena nodded slowly. Then I stay. For now, Marco said. She turned toward the door then paused. Marco. Yes. Thank you, for telling me the truth. He inclined his head slightly. You deserve that much. As Lena left the study, Marco remained behind, staring at the photograph on the desk. Giovanni Falcon had returned. Not in flesh, but in blood. And the city would feel it soon. The storm came without warning. By nightfall, the sky over the De Luca estate had turned black and heavy, clouds pressing low as thunder rolled across the grounds. Rain slammed against the tall windows, fierce and relentless, rattling the glass like fists demanding entry. Lena stood in the kitchen, unable to sleep. She had wrapped herself in a light sweater over the black dress she had worn earlier, her hair loose now, falling around her shoulders. The house felt different tonight. Tense. Alert. Like it was holding its breath. She poured hot water into a mug, her hand steady despite the thoughts racing through her mind. Falcon. The name echoed in her head, heavy and unreal. The lights flickered once. Then again. And then. Everything went dark. The kitchen fell into complete blackness. The hum of electricity died. The refrigerator went silent. The only sound left was the storm outside and Lena's own sharp inhale. Before she could move, soft amber emergency lights blinked on along the hallway, casting long shadows across the marble floors. What the hell? A woman's voice said. Lena turned. A tall figure stood in the doorway of the kitchen, perfectly calm despite the outage. She wore a fitted black dress, her dark hair smooth and glossy, her red lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Isabella Romano. Lena recognized her instantly. She had seen her once before, gliding through the hallway like she owned the place. "I was wondering when I'd finally meet you alone," Isabella said, stepping into the kitchen. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. The famous girl who turned Marco DeLuca into a nervous man. "I didn't ask to be here," Lena said carefully, gripping her mug. Isabella laughed softly. "No. You never do you? You just appear. And suddenly everything changes." Thunder cracked overhead. Isabella moved closer. "Do you know what people say about you?" she asked. "That you're a curse. That wherever Falcon blood appears, bodies follow." Lena stiffened. "You shouldn't be talking about things you don't understand." "Oh, I understand plenty," Isabella snapped, her voice sharpening. "I understand that Marco stopped listening. That meetings are delayed. That decisions are questioned. All because of you." Another flicker of light. Then the emergency lights went out too. Darkness swallowed the kitchen. "What's going on?" Isabella demanded, panic creeping into her tone. Lena didn't answer. She heard it. Glass shattering. A suppressed gunshot. "Down?" Lena shouted on instinct. She lunged forward, grabbing Isabella and dragging her to the floor just as bullets tore through the kitchen window. Cabinets exploded into splinters. Dishes shattered, raining down like glass hail. Isabella screamed. Lena clamped a hand over her mouth. "Quiet." Boots crunched on broken glass outside. Someone was inside the estate. The realization hit Lena like ice. They weren't here by accident. They were here for her. A door slammed open somewhere down the hall. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Target confirmed," a distorted voice said. "Find the girl." Lena's pulse roared in her ears. She scanned the counter blindly and grabbed the first heavy thing her hand touched, a cast iron skillet. It wasn't a gun, but it would have to do. "Is there another exit?" Lena whispered. Isabella's breath shook. "Pantry. Service door." "Go," Lena said. "Now." "What about you?" Isabella asked. Lena didn't answer. She slid a metal bowl across the floor. It clattered loudly against the stove. The flashlight beam snapped toward the sound. A man stepped forward. Lena surged up from behind the counter and swung. The skillet connected with his wrist. Bone cracked. The gun hit the floor. The man grunted in pain, reaching for her, but Lena kicked his knee hard and scrambled backward. Another arm locked around her neck from behind. "Got her?" The second man growled into his radio. Lena clawed at his arm, her vision dimming. A single gunshot exploded through the kitchen. The grip around her throat went limp. She collapsed forward, gasping. Marco DeLuca stood in the doorway. His shirt was rumpled. His face was hard with fury. Smoke curled from the barrel of his gun. Rocco and Elliot rushed in behind him, weapons raised. Marco crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled Lena to her feet, his hands checking her arms, her neck, her sides. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I'm fine," Lena rasped. He looked past her. At Isabella. At the shattered kitchen. At the bodies on the floor. "No," Marco said quietly. "You're not." He turned to Elliot. "Security logs." Elliot already had a tablet out, his face pale. "The perimeter wasn't breached," he said slowly. "The system was deactivated. From inside." Marco's jaw tightened. "There are only 4 access codes," Rocco said. "Yours, mine, Elliot's, and the Romano family liaison." Silence fell. Marco turned his gaze to Isabella. She straightened, her fear replaced by defiance. "Don't look at me like that." "You let them in," Marco said, his voice dangerously calm. "They would have killed her anyway." Isabella shouted. "My father warned you. She destabilizes everything. The Falcon bloodline brings war." "She was under my protection," Marco said. "She's a waitress." Isabella screamed. "She doesn't belong in this world." Marco stepped toward her slowly. "She belongs where I say she belongs." Rocco moved behind Isabella, gripping her arms. "Get your hands off me," she yelled. Marco didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You broke the alliance," he said. "You brought mercenaries into my home. You tried to kill someone under my roof." He turned to Rocco. "Take her." "Marco, please," Isabella started. "Now," he said coldly. She was dragged away, her heels scraping against the floor. Marco turned back to Lena. The storm raged outside. The estate felt suddenly fragile. "This house is no longer safe," Marco said. The Romano alliance is finished. Lena nodded, her body still shaking. Marco looked around the ruined kitchen at the blood, the broken glass, the betrayal. We can't stay here, he said. The estate is compromised. For the first time since arriving, Lena saw something new in his eyes. Not suspicion. Not calculation. But certainty. And it terrified her more than the gunfire ever had. They left Chicago before dawn. The city was still soaked from the storm, streets empty and shining under weak streetlights. Lena sat in the back seat of a plain black car, her heart racing as buildings blurred past. Sirens echoed somewhere far away, but none followed them. The silence inside the car felt heavier than noise. Marco drove. He wore a dark jacket pulled tight, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road. He hadn't said much since the attack. When he did speak, his voice was calm, controlled, like a man holding a storm behind his ribs. We can't use planes out of O'Hare, he said. Too many eyes. Lena nodded. She didn't trust her voice. They drove for hours, switching cars once then twice. By the time the sun rose, they were already ghosts. No phones. No names. Just motion. Italy came quietly. No sirens. No guns. Just heat, stone, and the smell of salt in the air. They arrived under false names, traveling light. Lena's feet touched Italian soil, and something strange settled in her chest. A feeling she couldn't explain. Not comfort. Not fear. Recognition. They drove south, away from cities, along narrow roads that curved through hills and olive trees. The sea appeared in flashes of deep blue, glittering beneath the sun. Marco slowed the car as they reached a broken stone gate half swallowed by vines. Villa Aurelio, he said. It looked abandoned. The house rose from the cliff like an old memory, stone walls weathered by time, windows shuttered, roof cracked but standing. The sea crashed far below, its rhythm slow and endless. This place belonged to your father, Marco said quietly. Long before you were born. Lena stepped out of the car. The wind lifted her hair. Her chest tightened. I've never been here, she whispered. No, Marco said. But he was. Inside, the villa smelled of dust and age. Sheets covered furniture. The floors creaked. Sunlight streamed through broken shutters, lighting faded murals on the walls. Lena moved slowly, touching stone, wood, history. He was real, she murmured. All of it was real. Marco watched her, saying nothing. They searched for hours. Loose boards. Hollow walls. Old safes long emptied. Then Lena found it. A groove along the fireplace mantel. Small. Almost invisible. She pressed it. Click. A hidden panel slid open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a heavy iron key, cold and worn. Her hands shook as she opened the journal. The writing was rushed, jagged. If you are reading this, I failed. Lena's breath hitched. I tried to end it clean. I stole the ledger of the five. Their money. Their deals. Their secrets. I hid it in Chicago. The vault is still there. Marco leaned closer as she read aloud. They think you know where it is. They think you are the key. Run. Don't trust the DeLucas. Silence swallowed the room. Marco straightened slowly. So, he said. That's why. They want the ledger, Lena whispered. Not me. They want both, Marco replied. The book and the bloodline. Lena looked at him. He warned me about you. Marco met her gaze steadily. In his world, trust was a weapon. She clutched the journal to her chest. Did you know? No, Marco said. But I suspected. Outside, thunder rolled across the sea. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled through the villa. Rain slammed against the stone walls. Candles flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Lena stood near the window, staring into the darkness. I should be scared, she said. But I'm not. I feel awake. Marco stepped closer. This life destroys people. So does running, she replied. He reached out, hesitated, then lowered his hand. I should leave you here. Somewhere quiet. I don't want quiet, Lena said softly. I want the truth. I want you. The words surprised them both. Marco closed the distance. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Hungry. Like two people clinging to the only solid thing left. Lena wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling his strength, his heat, his restraint finally crack. Thunder shook the walls. When they pulled apart, breathless, Marco rested his forehead against hers. This will cost us, he said. I know, Lena replied. A phone buzzed on the table. Marco froze. Only one person had that number. He answered. Elliot. The voice on the other end was tight. Urgent. They're already there, Elliot said. The syndicate. They knew. They're in Italy. 10 minutes out. Marco ended the call. We have to go, he said. Now. They ran. Rain soaked them as they sped down the narrow road, headlights slicing through darkness. Behind them, engines roared to life. They're following us, Lena shouted. Marco pushed the car harder. Gunfire shattered the rear window. They reached the marina in chaos, boats rocking wildly, ropes snapping in the wind. There. Marco yelled, pointing to a small speedboat. They ran. A bullet struck Marco's shoulder. He stumbled but kept moving, shoving Lena onto the boat. Start it, he roared. She did. The engine screamed to life. Marco untied the rope and kicked the boat away from the dock. Don't. Lena screamed. Get on. He shook his head, blood soaking his sleeve. Take the key, he shouted. Finish it. I won't leave you. I love you, Marco said. The boat drifted. Gunfire erupted behind him. Lena reached out as Marco turned back toward the men charging down the dock. He raised his gun. The distance grew. She screamed his name as the sea pulled her away. Alone. The boat vanished into the dark water, carrying Lena, the journal, and the key, while Marco DeLuca stood behind, choosing sacrifice over survival. The sea was endless. Dark water stretched in every direction, rising and falling beneath the small speedboat as it cut through the night. The wind whipped Lena's hair across her face, stinging her eyes, but she didn't slow down. Her hands gripped the wheel until her knuckles turned white. Only when the lights of the marina disappeared completely did her strength fail her. She let go of the wheel. The boat drifted. Lena collapsed onto the deck, the world spinning as everything she had been holding back finally broke loose. Her chest heaved. A sound tore out of her, raw, broken, almost animal. She screamed. She cried until her throat burned and her body shook so hard she thought she might snap in two. The image of Marco standing on the dock burned into her mind. Blood on his shoulder. His voice. His last look. I love you. The words replayed again and again, each time cutting deeper. She pressed her face against the cold deck and sobbed until there was nothing left in her. Until even grief was exhausted. When the tears stopped, she lay there staring up at the black sky. The iron key lay beside her. The journal was clutched to her chest. Marco had not died for her fear. He had died for her resolve. Slowly, Lena pushed herself up. Her body still trembled, but her eyes were dry now. Empty in a way that felt dangerous. She sat at the console and restarted the engine. I won't waste it, she whispered into the wind. I won't waste you. At first light, she found a quiet stretch of coast and docked the boat. Her hands moved automatically as she cleaned herself up, changed clothes, and hid the journal and key beneath her jacket. She borrowed a phone. Her fingers hovered for a long moment before dialing. Elliot, she said when the call connected. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Lena? He pushed me away, she said simply. They took him. Elliot's voice dropped. I know. I need you, Lena said. Both of you. Pause. Then, Rocco's with me. Good, Lena replied. Listen carefully. She spoke for a long time. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Rocco spoke. You sound like him. Giovanni? Lena asked. No, Rocco said. Marco. They didn't waste time. By nightfall, Lena was moving again, quietly, carefully. No direct flights. No patterns. She traveled the way her father would have taught her, the way Marco would have respected. When Chicago reappeared on the horizon, it felt different. Colder. Sharper. The city wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield. Lena stood in a private room overlooking the skyline, dressed in plain clothes, her hair pulled back tightly. Elliot moved around her, laying out maps, documents, schedules. This is the tower, he said, pointing. Meetings rotate, but tonight is fixed. Rocco leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Security is tight, but predictable. Lena studied the layout. She didn't rush. She didn't speak until she understood everything. Snipers here, she said finally, tapping two rooftops. Clear lines of sight. No civilians. Elliot raised an eyebrow. You're thinking big. I'm thinking clean, Lena replied. No chaos. No collateral. Rocco nodded slowly. Explosives. Controlled, she said. Just enough to lock exits and force attention. They worked through the night. By dawn, the plan was complete. When Lena finally stood alone, she went to the mirror. The woman who stared back looked tired. Well, human. That wouldn't do. She opened the garment bag Elliot had prepared. The white suit was inside. It was sharp, tailored perfectly, severe in its simplicity. No softness. No apology. She changed slowly, deliberately. White against the darkness. Her hair was slicked back into a clean knot. Her makeup was minimal but precise. Red lips, steady eyes. She looked nothing like the waitress who had poured coffee in a diner. She looked like intention. When she stepped back into the room, Elliot stopped short. Rocco let out a low breath. They won't see you coming. They will, Lena said calmly. They just won't understand what they're seeing. She reached into her pocket and wrapped her fingers around the iron key. Marco's sacrifice wasn't an ending. It was an opening. And Lena Falcon was ready to walk through it. The boardroom sat at the top of the tower like a throne room built for fear. Glass walls wrapped around the space, revealing the Chicago skyline below, cold, distant, uncaring. Black marble floors reflected the harsh ceiling lights. A long table stretched through the center, polished so smooth it looked wet. Marco DeLuca sat bound to a heavy oak chair near the center of the room. His wrists were tied behind him with thick restraints. His shirt was torn and stained dark with dried blood. One side of his face was swollen, his lips split, his breathing slow but controlled. He had been awake too long. Beaten enough to feel it in his bones. Across from him stood Vittorio Mancini. Vittorio moved with the confidence of a man who believed the world belonged to him. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his suit flawless despite the hour. He paced slowly in front of Marco, hands clasped behind his back. "You disappoint me," Vittorio said, his voice calm, almost bored. "You were supposed to inherit this city. Instead, you let a girl unravel everything." Marco lifted his head slightly. One eye focused on Vittorio. "She's not a girl," Marco rasped. Vittorio smiled thinly. "You're still protecting her. Even now." He stopped in front of Marco and leaned down just enough to make his point clear. "You should have handed her over," Vittorio continued. "Bloodlines are liabilities. Sentiment is weakness." Marco laughed softly, the sound wet and painful. "You wouldn't understand." Vittorio straightened and turned back toward the table where the remaining members of the council sat. 5 men. Each powerful. Each uneasy. "We are wasting time," Vittorio said. "The Falcon bloodline ends tonight. The girl will be found. And this," he gestured toward Marco without looking, "will be thrown from the roof." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. The elevator chimed. "What?" The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. Every head turned. "That elevator is locked," one of the council members said sharply. Vittorio frowned. The private elevator doors slid open. Lena Falcon stepped out. She wore a white suit that seemed to glow under the boardroom lights. Her hair was slicked back into a clean knot. Her face was calm. Her posture was straight. Behind her stood Elliot Graves and Rocco Bellini, both armed, both steady. Silence crashed down on the room. Vittorio stared. "You." Lena walked forward slowly, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said evenly. "I believe you're sitting in my seat." Vittorio recovered quickly. He laughed. "You walked into your own execution." "No," Lena replied. "I walked into a courtroom." One of the council members stood halfway. "Kill her." Lena raised her hand. And it was a small remote. "No one moves," she said calmly. "This building is wired. The elevators. The exits. If I drop this, none of us leave." The guards hesitated. Vittorio's smile faltered. Lena reached the table and placed a thick, worn book on its surface. The room seemed to lean toward it. "The Falcon Black Ledger," she said. "The reason my father disappeared. The reason you're all afraid." Vittorio sneered. "Paper doesn't scare me." "It should," Lena said. She turned her gaze to the man on Vittorio's left. "Don Armano," she said. "The docs contract you lost 3 years ago. Page 38. Vittorio tipped off federal inspectors and bought your shares through a shell company 2 days later." Don Armano stiffened. "That's a lie." Lena turned the page. "Dates. Accounts. Signatures." She shifted her attention to another man. "Don Keller. Your son's arrest. Not bad luck. Page 51. Murmurs rippled through the room. Vittorio's face darkened. "Enough." "You sold them out," Lena continued, her voice steady. "Every single one of them." The alliance cracked. Accusations flew. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Vittorio snapped. He drew his gun and aimed it at Lena's head. "Shut up," he screamed. "I don't care about the book. I'll kill you right now." Marco strained against his restraints. "Lena." She didn't move. She placed her left hand flat on the table, tucked her thumb into her palm, tapped twice. Tap, tap. The sound was soft. Almost nothing. The sniper round shattered the glass wall behind Vittorio. The bullet struck him square in the chest. Vittorio fell backward, his gun clattering across the floor, his body hitting the marble with a dull final sound. Silence. Absolute. Rocco and Elliot raised their weapons instantly. No one moved. Lena walked past Vittorio's body without looking down. She reached Marco. Her hands shook only once as she cut the restraints binding him. He slumped forward and she caught him. "You came back," he whispered, disbelief thick in his voice. "I told you," she said softly. "I don't run." She helped him to his feet and turned back to the council. "The ledger stays with me," Lena said. "The DeLuca territory is sovereign. Any move against us and this book goes public." The men nodded one by one. They had no choice. Rocco spoke quietly. "It's done." Lena exhaled. For the first time the room felt still. Marco leaned heavily against her shoulder. "Queen," one of the council members said, voice low. Lena didn't correct him. She had earned the title. The war ended quietly. There were no sirens. No public arrests. No headlines screaming about fallen empires. Power rarely ended with noise. It ended with silence and signatures and doors that never opened again. Marco DeLuca recovered slowly. The bruises faded first. Then the stiffness. The pain lingered longer, a reminder carved into muscle and bone. He spent most mornings walking the estate grounds, steadying his breath, rebuilding strength one careful step at a time. He didn't complain. He never had. Lena stayed close, not hovering, not fragile, present. When he was strong enough to sit through meetings, they began. Not council meetings the way they used to be. No shouting. No threats disguised as jokes. Just decisions. Boundaries. Lines drawn clearly and enforced without apology. The city adjusted. Territories were redefined. Alliances rewritten. Old debts were settled quietly or erased entirely. The remaining power holders understood the message without it being spoken aloud. The Falcon ledger existed. And Lena Falcon held it. She never raised her voice. Never needed to. Her authority was affirmed in smaller ways. People waiting for her to sit before speaking, eyes following her when she entered a room, conversation stopping mid-sentence until she nodded. She didn't demand loyalty. She earned it. Marco watched her from a distance sometimes, leaning against doorways or standing near windows, seeing the way she moved through rooms that once would have crushed her. There was no hesitation in her steps now. No doubt in her gaze. She had become something solid. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the estate in gold, Marco found her standing alone on the balcony. "You don't have to stay," he said gently. Lena smiled faintly. "I know." Silence settled between them, easy and earned. "I used to think power was something you took," Marco said. "Or defended." "And now?" Lena asked. "Now I think it's something you carry," he replied. Carefully. She nodded. "That sounds right." They didn't need to say more. A week later they returned to the city, not in secret, not in force. Just quietly. The silver fork looked the same. The sign still flickered. The windows still held tiny cracks from old repairs. The smell of coffee and grease still wrapped the place in something warm and worn. Lena paused outside the door. Marco watched her. "You don't have to go in." "I do," she said. The bell chimed as they entered. Pop stood behind the counter, older than Lena remembered, but his eyes were sharp. He froze when he saw her. "Lena?" he said, disbelief thick in his voice. She smiled. "Hi, Pop." He stepped around the counter without hesitation and pulled her into a tight hug. "I thought," he stopped himself. "You look different." "I am," she said softly. They slid into booth 4. The same booth. Marco sat with his back to the wall, habit intact. Lena sat across from him, fingers resting lightly on the table. Pop brought the coffee himself. "Black?" he asked Marco. "Black," Marco confirmed. Pop poured it slowly, carefully, like the moment mattered. Lena watched the steam rise. For a second the diner faded. The noise. The memory. The blood and rain and fear. She placed her left hand on the table. Not in warning. Not in fear. She tucked her thumb into her palm. Tapped twice. Tap, tap. Marco met her eyes and smiled. This time the signal meant nothing more than recognition. Survival. Pop chuckled. "Inside joke?" he asked. "Something like that," Lena replied. They drank their coffee in silence. Lena looked around the diner, The cracked tiles, the scratched tables, the place where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. I used to think destiny was loud, she said quietly. Like it announced itself. Marco sipped his coffee. And now? Now I think it waits, she said. For the moment you're ready to listen. Marco nodded. Power does the same. They finished their drinks. Outside the city moved on. Cars passed. People hurried by with no idea how close they had once come to chaos. Lena stood, slipping her coat on. She looked back once more at Booth 4. At the place where she had been nobody. Then she walked out, her steps steady, her future unwritten but firmly in her hands. The legacy was secured. Not through fear, but through choice. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.